Hello everyone, it's Daniel, Modern Identity Lead from Formula 5. In this video, I would like to talk about Formula 5's External Identities Hub Architecture, an architecture design proposal along with initial scripts and source code templates to accelerate development of modern customer identity and access management platforms leveraging Microsoft Entra External Id for customers and Azure Cloud Services. So let's start. In this first video from the series about External Identities Hub Architecture, I would like to start with important topic. What people think CIAM or Customer Identity and Access Management is. So typically when I talk to people who are not so familiar with CIAM, they think it's easy. It's like, hey, we can, spin up some service in the cloud like Azure AD B2C or Microsoft Entra External Id. Then we can configure some flows like login or registration flow, maybe apply some branding. And in the end, we have to integrate our application or set of applications. So probably it will take a week or two and we are done. And probably what they have in their heads is the image that you can see on the left side. Like, hey, there will be an identity provider which we will configure. There will be application or set of applications. We will integrate them with identity provider, and this identity provider will handle all the magic when it comes to authentication, registration, profile editing, and so on. It's simple. On the right side, we can see simple login page. We can see that there is username, password. It has to be easy. Actually, it's not. I wish it would be so easy, so simple. But it's not. There are many elements that we do not consider. So, on the next slide, let's talk about what people do not consider when it comes to CIAM or Customer Identity and Access Management solution. What about compliance and data residency? We said that we can configure easily login and registration pages. So let's talk about the registration process. Like, okay, we will collect some personal data from users like first name, last name, country, zip code, city, any other personal details. Yes, and it means that we have to store it somewhere. And also we have to somehow inform those users that we will process their data. We will store this data, and also we have to think about different kinds of processes to manage this data. What about the data residency, for instance? Do we want to store user profiles in Europe, in the United States, any other regions? How we will inform about this fact our users? What about the regulations like GDPR, for instance? Yes. What about the right to be forgotten? Like, hey, what are we going to do when user would like to delete account? And this account was used in multiple applications. Those are all the considerations related to CIAM. It's not directly technical stuff, but it's important because this will have impact how we architecture our CIAM solution. What about integration with other systems? Beautiful, we said that we can configure identity provider like Microsoft Entra External Id for customers, but maybe we want to exchange some data with external systems. Maybe we would like to, implement connection with our CRM system. Maybe on the login page during the authentication, we want to grab some data from external system and include it in the ID token that is issued to the application. Maybe during the registration, we want to pass information about the user to some external system. So, will identity provider handle everything like this? I don't think so. What about additional data requirements by applications once user is successfully authenticated? Yes. So sometimes, obviously, user email is enough or display name is enough, but sometimes application needs more details about users included in the tokens. So in this case, we have to also somehow think how we will include those details in the resulting tokens issued to applications. What about additional authentication methods? Initially, we think like, hey, let's use username and password, yes? But what about other authentication methods, like using one-time passcode, for instance, or using verifiable credentials, yes? So obviously it will add some complexity to our system, but on the other side, it will make user experience better when it comes to our solution. What about multi-factor authentication, about MFA? Do we want to support, one-time passcode sent to email? Do we want to use text messages with OTP? Maybe Microsoft Authenticator app. everything has to be considered here. And we have to think about it because on one side, it's, like technical decision, and we have to think also about the security. But on the other side, we have to think also about the user experience because users will stop using our solution or application. What about branding for login and registration pages? Obviously, we can use default branding, but it will not be aligned with the branding of our applications. So in this case, we have to think like, hey, those login and registration pages have to be branded somehow. We have to apply some background, maybe edit CSS files to apply some styling, colors, and maybe we would like to display our company logo on the main page. It has to also be considered. What about automation and integration with applications? Like, obviously, we can configure everything manually, but the better way is to automate things using potentially some scripts. And when it comes to integration with applications, it's easy when application is quite new and if we use potentially Microsoft authentication libraries, but also we have to configure them properly. And what about the situation where we have legacy applications? We would like to modernize them, to integrate them with modern identity providers. We have to consider everything here. Yeah, so it's really challenging. There are many, many more things I could list here. Those are only some of them, just to show you that CIAM, or Customer Identity and Access Management, is not only about identity provider configuration, it's not only about login page only or registration page only. There are many, many elements you have to consider before building Customer Identity and Access Management platform. So when you think about the architecture, you remember I presented simple identity provider and one application, but after considering all those elements I mentioned, we can quickly imagine that in our architecture for Customer Identity and Access Management platform, there will be more components. It's not only about identity provider. Of course, it's crucial here because this component will use for user authentication. However, for all those different kinds of integrations and things around the identity provider, we need additional infrastructure and additional services. So this is the sample architecture that we can apply to build such CIAM solution. Yes, so for instance, for Microsoft Entra External Id, if we want to use custom domain to display login and registration pages under the domain related to our company, we need Azure Front Door. And when it comes to enriching tokens or claims within the tokens issued by Microsoft Entra External Id, we have to use external API, so token enrichment API. We have to host this API somewhere. We have to secure this API. We have to also secure communication with this API. When it comes to authentication methods, maybe instead of using username and password, we would like to use verifiable credentials. So additional API layer is required here. And also we want to monitor the whole solution. Yes, so again, like Log Analytics Workspace and Application Insights components are required. And when it comes to automation, it can be Azure DevOps, it can be GitHub, but still, automation is required because we don't want to end up with a situation that we manually configure everything within our solution. So, as you can see, CIAM is not so simple. And that's why we created External Identities Hub Architecture at Formula 5. But before I will talk about it, let's really quickly summarize today's challenges to secure external identities. So there is accelerated growth of identities and applications focused on external users requiring secure user-friendly access. So it's not anymore about the internal users or corporate users. It's about the external world. It's about external users, users that will use our applications from different parts of the world. And probably they will use, like different kinds of devices, like mobile devices, maybe their personal computers and so on. So we have to provide user-friendly access to them. Evolving regulations and compliance requirements for protecting identities and auditing access rights. That's what I mentioned, like let's say GDPR here, yes? So we have to stay compliant. So there is like a technical side of CIAM solution, but also we have to remember about regulations, track them, and apply specific solutions in our platform to make sure that we stay compliant. massive rise in identity attacks, which requires advanced tools to discover and mitigate them as quickly as possible. So you can try to imagine the situation that within the enterprise, and when it comes to internal users, we talk about some kind of silo, yeah? Like those users are internal users and they can be also attacked. But when it comes to external world, there are so many different kinds of attacks that can be applied here. And we cannot, predict all of them because we have different kinds of users. They can access our applications from different devices, from different places, in different ways. So that's why we need specialized tools to make sure that our solution is secure. So that's why, knowing all those challenges, we collected all of them and we designed and created and implemented Formula 5's External Identities Hub Architecture. So let's talk about External Identities Hub Architecture. What is it? And then we can move forward and see some of its components. Okay, so first of all, External Identities Hub Architecture is powered by Microsoft Entra External Id for customers. So when it comes to identity provider, we use Microsoft Entra External Id for customers. So the new product that was announced during the Microsoft build and right now is generally available. You can use it, and that's why we decided to implement and use it within our solution. We have customizable user journeys. So in this case, we can implement solutions for login and registration processes, but also we can use native authentication API to create crafted to perfection UIs for mobile devices. So there is also native authentication API support. Modern authentication methods support. As I mentioned, like we can use username and password, but also we can use username and one-time passcode sent to email. And also, we can use verifiable credentials for authentication. Rich dashboards and metrics support. This is really crucial because sometimes we want to track users and their behaviors or what's happening within our CIAM solution, yes? So, for instance, how many users authenticate per month, from which regions, which applications do they use, and so on. So all those things are really important, not only from the technical perspective to see how our solution is used, but also it can be really beneficial from the business perspective to see, like, for instance, hey, our two applications are used similarly, or one of those applications is used less often than the second one. Yes, because we can see the number of authentications for the second application is basically increased. And also we can track users from different regions, and we can potentially say, like, hey, we have more users from United States than from Europe. Built with DevOps first and API first approach. And that's very important. When we were architecting and designing External Identities Hub Architecture at Formula 5, we wanted to be sure that it will be easy to implement this. It will be easy to add additional components to it, and it will be easy to deploy this whole platform. So that's why we have a set of API templates implemented that can be extended accordingly to clients' needs. So if you want to add additional functionalities to those APIs, it's really easy to do it. And also we build everything with DevOps first approach, so everything is automated. We don't want to end up with a situation that we have to deploy everything manually. So that's why we also have templates to make sure that the solution can be automated. It's built securely with containers on Azure. So as you remember, I mentioned that there is a set of APIs that can be used along with the identity provider, which is Microsoft Entra External Id for customers. So for instance, token enrichment API, yes, to include additional claims in the tokens that are issued to applications. So this API is hosted securely using Azure Containers apps on Azure in a secure manner. So in this case, we can be sure that we can build this additional layer securely using Azure Cloud Services. Identity protection with conditional access and MFA. So within this solution, we also use all the features provided by Microsoft Entra External ID for customers to make sure that customers' accounts are secure in the right way. And integration with verifiable credentials. This is something that we additionally added here, but it can be beneficial for many clients. If you want to use verifiable credentials within this platform, you can do it. So basically, within the External Identities Hub Architecture, you can enable verifiable credentials and use them to securely authenticate users. And also, you can use them to identify users. So this is part of the platform. Okay, perfect. So let's talk about some of the components, some of the features included in External Identities Hub Architecture. So modular and customizable, basing on your needs. And this is what I mentioned before. There is a set of APIs that we created, like token enrichment, user identity management, verifiable credentials, that you can use. It's for you. You don't have to start from scratch. Those templates are already implemented, so you can modify them to your needs and you can deploy them securely to the Azure cloud. And the same is for the login and registration pages. You can easily customize them accordingly to your needs. When it comes to monitoring the solution, there is support for user activity monitoring. So you can monitor usage of the platform directly from Microsoft Entra Admin Center. And you can see, for instance, monthly active users within your solution, new users added, and monthly inactive users, and authentications by locations, for instance. Everything is directly accessible from the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Support for verifiable credentials and modern authentication methods. So as I mentioned, when it comes to identity provider, within this solution, we use Microsoft Entra External ID for customers, but also we added support for verifiable credentials because it can be really beneficial for users to use this form of authentication instead of using, let's say, standard approach with username and password. So within this solution, you can also use verifiable credentials. Built with DevOps first and API first approach using containers on Azure. So I mentioned that there is a set of APIs like User Identity Management API that you can see on the right side. And those APIs are deployed to Azure Containers apps in the fully isolated and secure environment in the Azure cloud. So we decided to use containers because we strongly believe that that's the future of cloud services, and we want to make sure that our APIs will work independently and they will work on each platform. So in the end, if you decide that for any reason you don't want to use Azure Containers apps, you want to use any different platform, you can still use those APIs because those APIs are containerized. So in this case, you can launch them, you can run them basically anywhere you want. So that's very important to mention. Cloud native and secure architecture for external identities. That's what I mentioned. As you remember, it's not only about the identity provider. Obviously, Microsoft Entra External ID is the heart of the system because it's used for registration and authentication for users. However, there are all other components to host APIs, for instance, like Azure Containers apps, Azure API Management, which is used as an API gateway to access those APIs in a secure way, Azure Front Door to enable custom domain for Microsoft Entra External ID, Microsoft Entra Verified ID Service here, monitoring with Log Analytics Workspace and Application Insights, and also Azure DevOps to make sure that the solution can be automated. So Azure DevOps is used here to install all the templates, all the scripts, and also to configure deployment pipelines. Perfect. So there are 3 steps to help you adopt External Identities Hub Architecture. And we really wanted to make it simple to make sure that modern customer identity and access management solution implementation will not take ages. So how do we approach that? First, we organize discovery meeting with you and your team, and the outcome is deployment plan based on the collected requirements. So after meeting or few meetings, It depends on the needs and outcome of those meetings. We have deployment plan based on the collected requirement. And once we have it, we deploy only selected components. So it's not like we deploy everything to the Azure cloud because it's part of External Identities Hub Architecture. Nothing like this. Architecture is modular. So after collecting requirements, we decide which components should be included in the architecture. So for instance, if you do not plan to use verifiable credentials, no problem. We will not deploy verifiable credentials API. If there is no need to use token enrichment API to include additional details in the tokens issued to applications, no worries, we don't have to deploy it. So the outcome is solution deployed and ready for the integration with applications. So first step, integration phase. So the outcome is applications integrated with the deployed solution. Additionally, we provide your team with app samples to make the integration easier. And that's very helpful. So even if your team is aware what's happening in the application code, even if your team is aware how to integrate with the platform, if there is additional help needed, we have those samples so we can provide them with you. And then you can use them, or your team can use them to successfully test this integration and integrate with External Identities Hub Architecture. So only 3 steps to make it simple. So I strongly believe that this will help building modern customer identity and access management solutions in the Azure cloud without ages to complete those projects. Now let me show you some of the components of the platform, and let me also show you a simple demo that is using External Identities Hub Architecture. So let's see it in action. As I mentioned before, there will be more videos about External Identities Hub Architecture. So in this video, I just want to do a quick overview of the platform. So here is Microsoft Entra Admin Center and Formula 5 Customers Tenant. This is Microsoft Entra External ID for Customers Tenant. This is used as an identity provider to securely authenticate users. In the Azure cloud, there are additional components deployed to host additional APIs, like Token Enrichment API. So as you can see, there is Container Registry, API Management, Azure App Configuration, Azure Containers Apps Environment, and all other services that are required to securely host additional APIs layer, and also to securely communicate between them and Microsoft Entra External ID for customers. In the Azure DevOps, we also have the templates for the infrastructure, bicep templates. So all those different components are scripted here. So we have templates for them, so we can easily deploy this infrastructure to the Azure cloud. And also in the separate repository, we have templates for APIs. So as you can see here, we have templates for User Management API, Token Enrichment API, and Verifiable Credentials API. And also we have deployment pipelines created for them. So everything is ready here, and we can use this code as a template to implement additional features accordingly to your needs. So having said that, as you can see, External Identities Hub Architecture can really accelerate your CIAM solution implementation. In the end, I would like to also present a simple authentication flow. So here is our demo application hosted in the Azure cloud. And from there, I will click Login button. And I'm successfully redirected to the Microsoft Entra External ID for Customers login page. And there, I can either create my account or use existing one. So I've already created accounts, so I can provide my email address here and click Next button. And as you can see, one-time passcode was sent to my email, and I have to provide it here to successfully authenticate. So let me do it now. Let me check the code I received, and I will click Sign In button. And now I'm successfully authenticated and redirected back to the application. An application can look into the ID token and can display, for instance, my patient ID, which is additional claim included in the token. So now I can start using the portal. Okay, this is it. I hope you found this video interesting. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me using my email address displayed on the screen. And also, I hope that there will be a chance to use Formula 5's External Identities Hub Architecture to accelerate your modern customer identity and access management platform implementation. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video.